Morning, let's join together in singing our opening hymn, Come and Go With Me. Words on the screen.
Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Greater Naples. Namaste. You are welcome here. In fact, our mission statement says that we are a welcoming congregation, freely seeking intellectual and spiritual growth as we strive to create a larger community of peace, justice, and love. I am Martin Parks, and I'm honored to be your worship associate this morning. As UUs, we are encouraged to grow spiritually in fellowship with others, especially in this time of separation, by joining in worship and in other online opportunities offering education, reflection, and discussion. We try to do this in the spirit of acceptance and love, as well as commitment to one another through mutual support. If you haven't already done so, please plan to set aside a few minutes today to review our weekly email notices highlighting links to various learning and fellowship opportunities provided by UUCGN. Today, Mary Borland, our Director of Religious Exploration, is asking for a few words of hope and support, along with a photo, of course, that you might wish to share with our UUCGN high school seniors as they face traditional milestones in non-traditional ways. And tomorrow morning, Lois Graydon will tell us via Zoom how she and the garden crew purchased, installed gourds, and attracted a purple martin colony to our campus. And on Friday, the Spiritual Practices program will resume via Zoom at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. This program helps participants deepen their spiritual lives through exploring and experiencing a variety of spiritual practices, including keeping the Sabbath, meditation, worship and ritual, devotional reading, and work and service. You are welcome to attend online some or all of the 6 sessions that are encouraged to attend, but you are encouraged to attend the first session if possible, since it helps to set the tone for the remainder of the program. In addition to these events, you can join in the Tuesday meditation, the Wonderful Wednesday program, the Q&A with the minister session on Thursday, or even consider how you might participate in this year's UU General Assembly at a distance and at a phenomenal cost savings. Additional detail for each of these events and Zoom codes will follow in this week's emails. Please plan to spend some time reviewing the possibilities. Finally, there is our virtual coffee hour page on Facebook, and if you are with us this morning, you can find the chat button on Facebook and connect with others who are also watching. And now, let us center ourselves by taking a deep breath, freeing our thoughts, and settling into worship with this morning's prelude.
A chalice lit in our midst is a symbol of our liberal faith, a faith built on the foundation of freedom, reason, and welcome, a faith sustained by acts of kindness and justice, a faith that envisions a world flourishing with equality for all people, a faith that demands the living out of goodness, a faith that requires thoughtfulness, a faith of wholeness. The tiny flame we light is the symbol of the spark of all this within each one of us. Please join me in the chalice lighting words on your screen. May this flame stir our hearts and remind us of our mission to be truly welcoming, to grow in mind and spirit, and to widen the circle of peace, justice, and love. In January of 1889, Jane Addams and her friend Ellen Gates Starr opened up Hull House in Chicago, a settlement house that would serve as a place for young, educated women to live cooperatively with recent immigrants and migrants to the area whose living and working conditions were really deplorable. The larger aim of the settlement movement in the United States, of which Hull House was one of the first, was to bring the rich and poor in society together, to live more closely together in an interdependent community. Adams' idea was that though recent immigrants needed help to adapt to the area, to navigate the environment of work and geography and culture, there was also much that they could teach others. Caring community, right relations, social relations, important aspects of living together. Adams wrote that Hull House was soberly opened on the theory that dependence of classes on each other is reciprocal, and that as social relation is essentially a reciprocal relation, it gives form and expression that has a particular value in society. She firmly believed that American democracy required that each member of the society be allowed to fully develop themselves in their environment. And Hull House was to be a center for the development of all who lived in the area. As a young woman, Addams attended Rockville Female Seminary. And the expectation was for those who graduated and wished to live a life of service that they would become missionaries. But Addams would have none of that. She and some of her classmates had read Ralph Waldo Emerson and Bronson Alcott and had discussed moral philosophy. And when she was selected as the orator to represent her school in an intercollegiate oratorical competition in Illinois, she found that she carried with her not only her school's wishes, but the wishes of many young women in college in that time. She remembers some of the words she wrote and remembers also that they stood the test of time. She wrote, "Those who believe that justice is but a poetical longing within us, the enthusiast who thinks that it will come in the form of a millennium, those who see it as established by the strong arm of a hero, are not those who have comprehended the vast truths of life. The actual justice must come by trained intelligence, by broadened sympathies toward the individual man or woman who crosses our path. One item added to another is the only method by which to build up a conception lofty enough to be of use in the world." Jane Addams not only created a location for people at Hull House neighborhood to develop and receive help and support each other and give back, but soon realized that the broader society needed change in order to improve the living conditions around them in every inner city. And so she dedicated her life to that proposition of working for change in the social, legal, economic, and political systems that contributed to the abysmal conditions in the inner city. Adams never found comfort in any one particular church, but she was often asked to lecture and gladly did so at Unitarian congregations and ethical societies around the Chicago area. We owe a great debt to people like Jane Addams, who lived their values every single day, one item at a time. Let's enter into a time of sharing with our centering hymn, Find a Stillness. Find the stillness, hold the stillness, let the stillness carry me. Find the silence, hold the silence, let the silence carry me. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit giving power, I will find true harmony. It's at this point I miss you most, this time of sharing in this congregation, this time of togetherness and closeness, of caring and compassion. We hope that everyone in the congregation takes a deep breath. If you have a candle to light or a rock or a shell to hold, in honor of your own joys or sorrows, knowing that each and every day brings something new. We hope you'll do so. In the meantime, let's spend a little time in silence together, remembering the faces that we miss, the hands that we enjoy clasping, this wonderful congregation of caring and concern. A time of silence. I will add that my wife Ann is extremely grateful for the outpouring of good wishes, cards, and notes honoring the death of her sister Kathy more than a week ago. Ann was able to say goodbye more than once to her sister as we left New England the past few summers, but the grief of loss is still strong. And so we appreciate your kindness and your compassion. Our meditation this morning honors Unitarian Julia Ward Howe, who in 1870 actually, penned something that became known as the original Women's Day Proclamation. Let's enter into a time of meditation. Spirit of life and love, it is fitting on this day that we honor those who have nurtured us in our lives. We hope we have learned well from their tending and can pass the gifts of hope and love along to those to whom we have the opportunity to nurture. And two, in this often harsh world, it is important that we expand our nurturing love to include all who struggle to make their way in the world. In 1870, Julia Ward Howe wanted to harness the power of this kind of love to include all who struggle, and also to create lasting change. With the awful destruction and pain of the American Civil War still lingering in people's hearts and minds, Howe's response to news of a new war in Europe was one of great distress. As a well-known abolitionist activist and an activist for women's rights and a highly regarded poet, Howe put her passion into words in writing an appeal to womanhood, which would go on to be known as the Mother's Day Proclamation. "Arise then, women of this day," she wrote. "Arise, all women who have hearts, whether our baptism be of water or of tears." Howe called for women of all nations to gather, first to mourn the dead, but then to work for peace. Women need no longer be made a party to the proceedings that fill the globe with grief and horror, she wrote. In this cry for peace, Julia Ward Howe's vision of Mother's Day went to the heart of what is most precious about mothers, the giving and not the taking of life. She could envision the power of women coming together to speak their truths to the existent power and promote peace among nations. What can we envision in our struggling world? It is a question we must answer and a call we must take up. As nurturing people facing our own trials every day, now and in the months and years ahead.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much. Kathy Lee Crane, a UU minister and member of the UU Ministers coaching team, has provided a provocative insight into Mother's Day, which inspired me to add my own reflections. May means Mother's Day. For most of us, May does mean Mother's Day. But for me, May was also my mother's birthday. In fact, because my mother's birthday was on May 11th, it often coincided with Mother's Day, resulting in lots of blended gifts, which had a Hallmark card on one side saying, "Happy Birthday," and a Hallmark card on the other side saying, "Happy Mother's Day." But was as her nature, she would spend time reading each card from each and every one of her 4 children carefully, slowly, and aloud, and then hold it close and make sure that we knew it was the best possible verse anyone could ever receive. Even then and always, she made sure we grew in knowing the joy of giving over receiving. Sadly, however, Hallmark and other commercial greeting card companies too often fail to remember many women who don't fit Mother's Day in quite the same wonderful way. There are no cards on the rack for the women who gave up children for adoption, never to see them again. There are no cards for the women who faced the painful and difficult choice to end a pregnancy. There are no cards for women who desperately want to conceive and bear children and cannot. No cards for women who have lost children of any age, or for the women whose children have abandoned them in anger. There is little consolation for them on a day so full of motherhood. Every year when Mother's Day rolls around, I wish there were just a little less focus on traditional motherhood and a little more acknowledgement of the not-so-traditional mothers among us, people who come in all colors, shapes, sizes, genders, and ages. And more than anything, I wish for empathy for those who suffer because, as other mothers are being honored, they don't fit in quite the same wonderful way. Let us honor them all on this day. Women who conceived, women who bore, women who reared, women who lost, women who let go, women who made different choices, and people of any gender who mother. Happy Mother's Day. May each of you know your worth to all of us and hold our love close as the best possible verse anyone could receive.
I want to thank everybody who has responded to our appeals for our social justice initiatives, both the Ministerial Discretionary Fund for weekend meals for kids and for legal aid services of Collier County, and who have donated to other organizations outlined in our newsletter item. I also want to say that there are other activities afoot here on the social justice front in support of food justice in the area. Folks like Ellen Hemrick and Yvette Stafford, who are working to provide fresh produce for people in need, and Bill McCormick, who's working with a team of people to help Meals for Hope deliver as many meals as possible in the area. Those folks and others are working diligently to make a difference in the world today, and we honor them especially this morning in this time of honoring, nurturing people. And in terms of nurturing, we all know that this place, this congregation that holds us together, even if not in body, requires some nurturing as well. So I hope that in the spirit of Mother's Day, of nurturing, that you will spend a little time during the offertory or afterwards going to our website and pushing the donate button and contributing to the ongoing mission of this congregation. And if not, then I hope you'll contribute to your own little pot to bring with you when we're all able to come back together in the future. So without further ado, the morning's offering will be gratefully received.
Jack London inspired many of us as young men with his lusty stories of adventure and daring. The Call of the Wild, White Fang, and The Sea Wolf were completely readable and filled with driving force only imagined by most boys and men throughout the last century. As a result of both his literary skill and his political ideology, London was invited to write the following preface to Upton Sinclair's anthology, The Cry for Justice, Literature of Social Protest. As well done as it has been done, it will be done better. They who become converted to the gospel of service will serve truth to confute liars and make of them truth tellers, will serve kindness so that brutality will perish, will serve beauty to the easement of all that is not beautiful, and will serve the weak that they may become strong. They who become converted to the gospel of service will devote their strength not to the debasement and defilement of weaker beings, but to the making of opportunity for them to make themselves into men and women rather than into slaves and the downtrodden. It is so simple, really, service. That call is for nobility of thinking, nobility of doing. The call for service is the totality of it. He who serves all best serves himself. Times change, and men's minds with them. In the past, civilizations defined themselves in terms of power, of world power, or otherworldly power. No civilization has yet attempted to define itself in terms of love. Perhaps the time is now. Perhaps now is the time for women and men to build a new and higher civilization that will define itself in terms of service and love.
During our wonderful Wednesday program a week and a half ago, we watched a TED Talk by Yifat Susskind, executive director of Madre, an international humanitarian organization dedicated to women's rights. Her message was titled, "In Uncertain Times, Think Like a Mother." And in her talk, she suggested that all of us, whether mothers or not, whether female or male, whether we had great personal role models or not, we all had access to that experience, the lens of motherhood, the nurturing and caring and problem-solving ideal of motherhood that we need to tap into in order to respond to the world in times of stability or in times of crisis, like today. Intentionally bringing a child into the world is, at its essence, an act of hope and love, a belief in a better future than what exists today. Acting like a mother in response to today's world requires both the long view, the hope, and a clear awareness of what needs to happen in the present moment, guided by love. Susskind agreed that it's easy to focus on all the obstacles in our way to a better world: greed, inequality, violence. And of course, all of these exist. But, she says, but there is also an option to plant a seed, a different seed, and cultivate what you want to see grow, even in the midst of crisis. Planting a seed of justice is an act of hope and love. Susskind's message resonated with me deeply, reminding me of the seeds planted in both me and my siblings by my own parents and grandparents about the responsibilities we all have to make this world a better place. Those seeds were sown many times in many different conversations, but those who guided us in our early lives also tended their garden well, teaching not just by word, but by deed, always taking active roles in civic, congregational, or charitable work, often participating in more than one organization. There was no pomp about it, no chatter announcing even to the family how much time or talent or treasure had been afforded these efforts. There was just the doing, with sleeves rolled up when necessary. One of my grandmother Fisher's greatest heroes was Susan B. Anthony, a Unitarian who, in the true spirit of motherhood, held a simple view, a pragmatic view. "I'm tired of theory," she wrote. I want to hear how we must act to make this world a happier and more glorious place. There's a wonderful story about Susan B. Anthony that when she was interviewed by the adventurous journalist Nellie Bly, she was asked if she prayed, and her response matched her Unitarian theology. "I pray every single second of my life," she replied, "not on my knees, but in my work. My prayer is to lift women into equality with men. Work and worship are one with me. I cannot imagine a God of the universe made happy by my getting down on my knees and calling him great." Susan B. Anthony is an exemplar of the many prophetic women and men who have helped shape Unitarianism and Universalism throughout the centuries, their deeds as much as their words. Unitarian Universalism as a combined faith is a liberal faith, one of the most liberal religions in the world today. According to theologian and educator Paul Razor, religious liberalism's defining characteristic is its posture of intentional engagement with modern culture. Liberal theology starts with the premise that religion should be oriented toward the present, taking fully into account modern knowledge and experience. Rather than resist new developments, liberals tend to incorporate them into their world religious views, embracing them and even pushing forward towards more change. From the earliest days, this is how outstanding Unitarians and Universalists have continually sought to keep their religious commitments fresh and relevant and credible by being active in the present while looking towards the future. Early Unitarians strongly believed in salvation by character and thus were ready to dive into the American experiment. Many of them inspired by the Reverend William Ellery Channing, who helped define the course of the new Unitarian movement in the early 1800s. There was Joseph Tuckerman, a colleague of Channing's and a pioneer in American social work. Horace Mann, one of Channing's congregants who worked to create the first public school systems in Massachusetts. Another congregant, Elizabeth Peabody, an important Unitarian in her own right, brought kindergarten to this country. Dorothea Dix worked with the imprisoned and the mentally impaired. Dr. Samuel Gridley Howe developed methods for teaching the blind and the deaf. Julia Ward Howe, feminist and author of the Battle Hymn of the Republic, as well as the original Mother's Day Proclamation, was also inspired by Channing's ministry. And if Channing helped create the framework for an active social engagement in society, then the Reverend Theodore Parker in the mid-19th century pushed liberal religion, at least liberal religion of comfortable Bostonians, to the edge of their comfort zone. Parker was a staunch abolitionist who formed what was called the Vigilante Committee to help and harbor runaway slaves, many of whom stayed in his own home. When the Runaway Slave Act was passed to abolish that kind of activity, Parker chose to ignore it, determined to follow what he saw as a higher law. In his day, Parker saw the controlling power in society as residing in four major areas: the business world, the political arena, the ecclesiastic or religious sphere, and the power of the written word, literary power. Parker clearly understood that in the face of these power centers, the world's inequities, which existed because and despite their existence, could not be adequately addressed through charity alone. What was needed was systemic change, and any reformer who wished to make change happen had to work both in and outside the power structure. Even in those days, Parker was particularly wary of the influence of the world of commerce and as it had on politics. He wrote, "It can manufacture governors, senators, judges to suit its purposes as easily as it can make cotton cloth." He wrote, "Your Congress is its mirror." As the country and the world changed throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, Unitarians and Universalists discovered new insights from the world's religion and new understandings from the fields of science and technology, which not only contributed to an increasing global sense of humanity and an expanding vision of beloved community, but also a sense of even greater responsibility. Clarence Skinner, who was the dean of the School of Religion at Tufts College, a Universalist seminary in the early 20th century, inspired a generation of young preachers to bring social issues into the pulpit and into the activities of the congregational life. He believed that if Universalists were true to the spirit of love, they should be, in his words, in the front rank of the daring few, fighting the battles of social emancipation, pledging themselves to free humanity from economic degradation which fetters it body, mind, and soul. Universalism, he wrote, by its very genius is led into the great social maelstrom because it is essentially a battle for the freedom of the common man. It is a struggle for complete emancipation. As the old Universalist adage goes, none of us are saved until all are saved. About the same time that Skinner was extolling social justice work, the humanist movement in America was beginning to have a major influence in both Unitarians and Universalists. Humanists understood the nature of morality as being uniquely human, not some edict from above, and thus asserted the need for positive human intervention in the affairs of the world. Among the 15 points of the first Humanist Manifesto, written and signed in 1933, were the words, "The goal of religious humanism is a free and universal society in which people voluntarily and intelligently cooperate for the common good. Humanists demand a shared life in a shared world." From the birth of our nation to the present, there have been prophetic women and men within our Unitarian and Universalist traditions who have made significant contributions to the betterment of our society. And for each one whose name we know, there have been thousands of unsung heroes whose efforts have been indispensable in that advance. From those involved in the civil rights movement and the women's movement and the effort for LGBTQ rights and for environmental justice, they have heard the call from their own center, found their individual and religious moral compass, hitched it to the wagon of hope and the power of community, and pointed it towards the future, planting seeds of love all along the way. You and I, as Unitarian Universalists, are the beneficiaries of their work and deeds, and yet we can't reflect too long on their lives, for there's much remaining for us to do. Like Theodore Parker, we have to be cognizant of the realities of the world and speak our own truth to power, aligning our actions with our words. Each of us needs to search within ourselves for an understanding of how we fit into this world and what is important now and into the future. We need to work to clarify our values within the context of community, and then figure out what those core values call us to do. Acting perhaps like a mother in response to today's world requires both the long view, the hope, and a clear awareness through love of what needs to happen in the present moment. Yifat Susskind closed her TED Talk with these thoughts. When you think like a mother, you prioritize the needs of the many, not the whims of the few. When you think like a mother, you don't build a seawall around beachfront property because that would divert floodwaters to communities that are still exposed. When you think like a mother, you don't try to prosecute someone for leaving water for people crossing the desert, because you know that migration, just like mothering, is an act of hope. Again, remembering Theodore Parker's warning, we cannot really expect all of our elected officials in Washington to begin thinking like mothers without people from the outside, the existing power structure, pushing exceptionally hard for change. And for me, and perhaps for you, these words from my grandmother's hero, Susan B. Anthony, echo continually in my conscience. Cautious, careful people, always casting about to preserve their reputation and social standing, never can bring about real change. Our benediction today comes from the Reverend Joseph Cherry, minister at the Unitarian Universalist Society of Cleveland. If we have any hope of transforming the world and changing ourselves, we must be bold enough to step into our discomfort, brave enough to be clumsy there, loving enough to forgive ourselves and others. May we as a people of hope and love be granted the strength to be so bold, so brave, and so loving. Blessed be. Have a wonderful day. Happy Mother's Day.